It's all about geometric sequences and series. So keep that in mind as we're working. When you're trying to find a ratio, so in arithmetic sequences and series, we talked about the common difference. That was a number that you added or subtracted to something to get to the next number. In geometric series and sequences, we talk about something called a common ratio, not difference. And the reason they call it a common ratio is it's something that we multiply by to get to the next number. The way that you find that, instead of taking the second number minus the first number, is you'll take the second number divided by the first number to figure that out. That's what these things are talking about over here. So you see A2 divided by A1. They're talking about how do I find my common ratio? Let's look at finding the common ratio in number 1. In number 1 we see a list of numbers. That's called a sequence. Good job, because sequence is separated by commas and series is by pluses or minuses. So when I'm looking for the common ratio, I would take 6 divided by 3, and that gives me 2 as my common ratio. You could have done 24 divided by 12, 12 divided by 6, but I usually take the second one divided by the first one. Number 2, let's find out whether the sequence is geometric or not. The way that you do that is you check out to see all the common ratios between the numbers to make sure that they all work. So in number 2, I would take negative 2 divided by 1. That produces negative 2. I would look at 4 divided by negative 2. That produces negative 2. I would look at negative 8 divided by 4. That produces negative 2. And so my answer is yes, because all of my common ratios are negative 2. Okay, in letter B, as we look at letter B, and I'm checking the ratios, I would take negative 6 divided by 9. That's negative 2/3. So that's a good start to figure out what's going on. And then I go with the next thing, which would have been 4 divided by negative 6, and that's negative 2/3. And I think to myself, okay, yeah, rock on, that's cool. And then I run to the next one, which usually throws a few people for a loop. And I want to take negative 8/3 divided by 4. Yikes. Now what? Close.
Just multiply.
I liked what you said, I just would say it a different way. Don't forget this is 4 over 1. And whenever you're trying to figure out fraction divided by fraction, that's where you invert and multiply. So that's in essence what Tristan was saying. So you multiply by a 4th. And so negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. And 3 times 4 is 12. And negative 8 over positive 12 is negative 2/3. And yay! The answer is yes. And the ratio is negative 2/3. And then the last one, as you look at it, you would take 2/7 divided by 1/5, which is the same thing as saying 2/7 times 5 over 1. And that gives you 10/7 as your first ratio. And then your second ratio that you're trying to find would be 3/9 divided by 2/7. And so that would be 3/9 times 7/2, which is 21/18, which is the same as 7/6. And so here it's no, I can stop already, because those two ratios aren't the same. And you're done. In number 3, we're going to write the first 4 terms of a geometric sequence. And they tell us what our common ratio is, and they tell us what our first term is. So as I'm writing these down, they give me a sub 1. They say that a sub 1 is 6. And they want the first 4 terms. Make sure you read the directions carefully. They already gave you one of them. Write it down. It's a freebie. And then the second one, if I want a sub 2, pretty easy to find. You just take the number that you had, and to get to the next number, multiply by your ratio. So 6 times negative 1/4 is negative 6/4, which is the same as negative 3/2. That's my a sub 2. If I want my a sub 3, I can just take what I had before and write down -3/2 and go to the next number, which means multiply by my common ratio of -1/4. So that would give me 3/8. And of course, then that means that my last number, a sub 4 that I'm looking for, I can take my third number, and if I want to go to my fourth number, I would just multiply by -1/4, and I would get -3 32nds. You should always, of course, simplify if you want to. There was a formula, I don't know if you noticed it on the previous page, it looks something like the following, I believe. A sub n, which means I'm looking for any particular number, will be a sub 1 times your ratio to the n minus 1. Now, if I were to pick any example out of number 3 and try to find that, for example, let's say I was looking for a sub 3. A sub 3 would have then been a sub 1, which was a 6. And then I would take that ratio of -1/4 and raise it to the 3 minus 1 power. If you were to type this in your calculator, I'm pretty sure that after you hit math, enter, enter, you would find out that it is 3/8 as well. Try it right now. That brown formula is the formula to find any term in a geometric sequence. Except number 4 uses some kind of weird terminology. And this terminology seems to confuse people. And so what I want to tell you is, when you see this AK plus 1 thing, all that is talking to you about is saying the next number that you want. So you can look at that, and it really is kind of unimportant to a certain degree to understand what it's saying. I'll show you shortly on the chalkboard what it means. But it just means find the next number. And the AK thing is not a gun that you play with in COD. The AK is talking about what you have right now. So in order to find out what you're going to get next for the next term, you're going to take what you've got right now and multiply it by 1/3. For example, in this particular one, I know that my a sub 1 is equal to 81. That means if I want my a sub 2, I'm going to take 1/3 and multiply it by what I've got right now, which is my 81. And that would give me 27. So this right now thing that we had in the green highlight was the 81 that I plugged in. So all it's telling you to do is, whatever you see right now, do this to it. And that's it. That means then that for my A3, I would take that 1/3, and instead of multiplying by 81 now, I'd multiply by 27. And then I'd get 9. And if I wanted my last number, I would take my 1/3, and I'd multiply by what I've got right now, which is the 9, and I'd end up with 3. So my first term is 81, my second one is 27, my third one's 9, my fourth one's 3, and my common ratio is 1/3. I'm multiplying by 1/3 every single time. Earlier I said I probably wouldn't use that a sub n formula unless I really needed to. Here's one in number 5 where I could actually go and find each of the terms. They give me the first term is 4, and I can find the second term, the third term, the fourth term, and the fifth term in that order if I want to, or I could just use the formula. So here's one where I may choose to use the formula. Like, what if they would have said, hey, find the 50th term of this? Writing out 50 things instead of just doing 1 is ridiculous. So they asked me for the 5th one. If I'm trying to find the 5th term, that means that my a sub 5 term will be equal to my a sub 1 term, which is 4, times the common ratio to the 5 minus 1. Yeah. Oh. Or in other words, I'm talking about my first term times the common ratio to the 4th power. So this is 4 times 1/16, or in other words, 1/4. Now you could type that in your calculator if this is on a non-calculator portion of the test. But what you need to know is there are multiple ways to do this problem. I could actually find each consecutive term I could take 4 times a half, that's 2. 2 times a half, which is 1. 1 times a half, which is a half. And 1/2 times a half, which is 1/4, and find the fifth term. So I can use the formula. In case you don't remember, the formula said a sub n equals a sub 1. Take your ratio and take it to the n minus 1. Okay, that's a formula that you need to know. So here's a particular problem, number 6, where you definitely don't want to do this by hand, going first, second, third, fourth. So I'm going to use the formula. If I use the formula, I know that I want a sub n equals a sub 1 to the times r to the n minus 1. And there's a few things that I know. For example, I know first of all that my a sub 1, right off the bat, is equal to 1. If I look at the numbers being generated as I go along, 1 to 3, 3 to 9, 9 to 27, that tells me that my ratio is 3. And then I want the 20th term in this sequence. And if I want the 20th term, this is telling me that I have n equals 20. I put it all together, and I write down that a sub 20 will be equal to 1 parentheses 3 to the 20 minus 1. Or in other words, 3 to the 19th. This is a very large number. 1 comma 162 comma 261 comma 467. So we have thousands, millions, 1,162,261,467. So for the rest of this lesson, instead of talking about the nth term